did one day of weather just define a generation of Floridians? We start here.
That was my house. My house is gone.
An entire state wakes up to what was previously unthinkable.
3 hours watching the water rise. What was that like?
Scared to death.
We'll take you around the aftermath of Hurricane Ian and the urgent rescues that continue to unfold. Vladimir Putin's about to make it official. He's illegally annexing parts of Ukraine.
It is an authoritarian state with imperial ambitions.
Even if a shot isn't fired today, this is a big escalation in this war. And pop quiz, are your student debts still getting wiped out?
We don't know where this is going next, so TBD.
In the face of lawsuits, the Biden administration just changed the rules on who's eligible. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. A lot of towns have these live streaming cameras that are just always on, public to the world. Just drop in and see what the streets look like. Fort Myers, Florida has a camera like this, just looking down a road by the beach. It was rolling on Wednesday as Hurricane Ian swept in. And as winds pick up, you can see this in real time. Water starts to trickle from the beach towards the street. Over the next hour on time-lapse, you see it just take over. More seawater sweeps in. Now it's combining with runoff from other streets nearby until everything in sight is submerged. Then the water starts to creep up buildings higher and higher.
Oh my God, that's the lobby.
In one video, a camera on a light pole comes about eye level with these floods until a piece of debris floats by and knocks it off kilter. ABC News caught a building slowly being rocked off its foundation.
And that little house that we were talking about all day has gone.
And as the sun set on Florida on Wednesday night, that's what a lot of people were left with. They weren't able to move around neighborhoods and see how bad the damage was. The cameras were useless. Well, yesterday morning, as Ian passed to the other side of Florida and then out to the Atlantic, people were able to poke their heads out and see what in the span of a day became perhaps one of the most destructive and deadly storms in American history. One of those people getting a look at all this was ABC's Victor Oquendo, who is holed up in Fort Myers. Victor, can you just describe where you are and the damage you've been seeing over the last 24 hours?
Brad, we are still in Fort Myers. That storm was as powerful as anything I've felt. Just an unbelievable storm surge. Watching that one come in as this storm pretty much stalled right over where we were.
That's our deck. That was my house. My house is gone.
Our hotel was very close to the island of Sanibel, and there's one way in, one way out. It is the causeway. We had a chance to check it out first thing Thursday, and what we saw was that part of the bridge had just washed away. It got torn apart during the storm.
Wow.
And we haven't been able to make it to Sanibel yet, because right now you can only access it by boat or by helicopter. Governor DeSantis calling it a biblical storm surge there.
Well, and if we're talking about neighborhoods flooded, we know that a lot of people were in their homes as these waters just rose and rose and rose. Do we know about loss of life? Do we know how many people might not have made it out?
We don't know for sure yet, Brad. I think right now the focus is definitely on search and recovery.
We're able to hoist people from harm's way and remove them from dangerous situations to safety. That is our primary focus right now at this point in time.
They're dealing with high water, cities that don't look like cities anymore, unstable platforms and buildings, and also hazards to our aviators and our pilots who are flying through these areas with, down power lines and poles and cranes and those sort of things.
As we speak, the number is less than 10, but we all kind of expect that number to go up.
Right. At this point, it would just be about finding survivors and getting them to safety as quickly as possible. On that point, at what point did rescues become possible yesterday? And what kind of rescues were being performed?
Well, in preparation for the storm, we spoke to a number of people from emergency operations offices to hospitals, and everyone made it clear that first responders can't get to you during a storm like this. They want to, that's their job, but once it becomes too dangerous for them and they're risking their lives to get to you, that's out of the question.
We got calls coming into 911, and we are prioritizing them so that the second it goes under 45 miles per hour, we get back out there. With 1 second, we're going to be right out answering those calls.
So once the storm passed and it was safe enough for them to get out there, rescues got underway immediately, and they haven't stopped ever since.
Cajun Navy's here for you!
We spent some time with the Cajun Navy. They were pre-positioned here as well. We went into this one small neighborhood. It had been completely inundated with water.
There was the rescuing of the 3 people.
They got word of a family. It was a mother and a daughter and their dog trapped inside their home. So we went, we checked it out. I got on their boat with them, and sure enough,
We're coming to you!
as we pulled up, there's the daughter. She's actually climbing out of her window. The guys from the Cajun Navy, they jumped out, they got into the water, helped her onto the boat.
There we go. Nice and easy.
Got the dog too. Mom got on board.
The hardest part was when the water got real high and we were almost hitting our head to the carport top.
While they were on the boat, I asked them what it was like, what the last 24 hours had been like, not knowing that they had called for help at 11 a.m. the day before as the storm was hitting, and they weren't able to be rescued until noon the following day. More than 24 hours, Brad, they were holding out hope that someone would come get them. Watching the water rise. What was that like?
Scared to death. Scared to death. I thought I was gonna die.
At one point, they actually stood on top of their car because the floodwaters were rising too high inside their home.
So the 3 of you rode out the storm together?
Yeah, we did.
Holding on to the dog on top of the car.
They were able to eventually make it back inside their home once it receded a little bit, but they knew they had to get out. And here was the best part. Once they made it back on land, Mom had no idea, but her son Michael was waiting there for them.
Oh my God, I'm back! Oh my God!
We didn't know this was going to happen either. Michael ran right up to the boat, gave Mom a huge hug. I asked him what it was like to finally be reunited with them after everything they'd just been through. Mom jumped in and said, "He told me he loves me. He never does that."
Well, I mean, you've lived in Florida a long time, right? Like, you've seen a lot of hurricanes. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Are you getting a sense, if you're able to, I know that your focus has really been on this hard-hit area, but how much of the state was affected and how long these areas are going to be uninhabitable?
Ian was a monster storm, still doing damage as we speak.
So it's going to pop up and then turn back toward the U.S. It'll go inland a little bit, but really the coast's going to get the worst of both that surge and the wind. I'd be more worried about heavy rain and that flash flood threat inland.
The first hurricane I can remember was Hurricane Andrew in 1992. This was a very different storm. In 2004, there was Charlie. This one almost took an exact path as Charlie.
I don't have a home, I don't have a car, and I don't have a job because I used to clean these units. So you lost. I'm homeless and scared.
What I can tell you is what I've seen so far in the Fort Myers area, and it was the places along the coast that really took the brunt of this storm. Those were also the places that were under those mandatory evacuations. But you have to keep in mind that the earlier tracks for this storm had it going north of this area. So a lot of people were scrambling to get ready at the last second. Some didn't evacuate because they either couldn't or because they just didn't have enough time. And those are the areas that are going to take the longest time to bounce back.
Yeah, and you mentioned people that couldn't get out or people who just thought the storm wasn't going to hit them as directly as it did. And you can just imagine how helpless a lot of these residents ended up feeling here. And like you said, Ian's still not done in the Atlantic right now, where it's strengthening again over water, heading towards Charleston. Again, we'll keep an eye on the storm surge that's been devastating so many. Victor Oquendo there in Fort Myers. Thanks a lot.
You got it.
Next up on Start Here, the ballots were served by men with guns, but a sham election could still have huge consequences in Ukraine. We'll go there after the break.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House. Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5. Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
'Tis time.
The real monster fun begins.
Here they come. Why was I cursed with such idiot sisters?
Just lucky, I guess.
Sounds creepy. We're home.
31 Nights of Halloween. Watch all October on Freeform.
All she wanted to do was help people, and y'all took that from us.
I started to think about how it's possible that really well-intended people can be doing racist things.
We have the highest maternal morbidity rate of all industrialized nations.
Every injustice in our society shows up in maternal health.
Our healthcare system was built on a legacy of systemic racism.
When black mothers die, there's a ripple effect. We call it aftershock.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on. It's poison, it's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live.
The hottest views in daytime are happening right here.
We talk about things on this show that people don't talk about.
That I can't wait to see. Honest takes from strong women. We need all hands on deck, and we need it right now. This is the time to speak out. Unafraid to get real.
We stick by our points of view.
We're all seeing it differently, and that's the beauty of The View.
And that's why the most watched #1 daytime talk show is The View. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
'Tis time. We're home.
For the last couple of weeks, Ukraine has taken back a lot of territory from the Russian military. It's Ukraine that's been on the offensive. It's Ukraine taking the initiative. But today, Vladimir Putin is about to make one of his biggest attacks yet on Ukraine's sovereignty, and it won't be on a battlefield. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell is in Kiev right now. Ian, can you just explain what's happening today, what this big step is?
Yes, I mean, we've been talking about this actually for a little while. This was essentially a hastily arranged referendum in 4 parts of Ukraine that are partially occupied by Russian forces. These regions, 2 of them are in the east, the far east of the country, where it borders Russia, and 2 are down in the south. These are recently occupied territories this year. And the referendum, it's a referendum basically because it just had one very simple question: would you like to be part of the Russian Federation or not? And the results, which I don't think surprised anyone because of the way the vote was conducted, and that was conducted under the conditions of a militarily occupied area, the results were overwhelmingly in favor. What does that mean? It means that then the leaders of those areas go to Vladimir Putin and go, hey, we'd love to join the Russian Federation. And Vladimir Putin goes, oh, okay, no problem, you can join us. So Vladimir Putin is basically going to sign a document, signing this agreement. They then de facto become part of Russia. It means that any attack on any of these territories, which are still very firmly, legally part of Ukraine, but anyway, Russia sees them as theirs, attack on those areas is an attack on Russia, and Putin reserves a right to respond accordingly. And we know that he's raised the specter of a potential nuclear response if Russia or any of its territories are attacked.
Right, I was going to say, Ian, it does seem like there's a big difference between Putin today saying these regions are independent now. They can do what they want. He's not saying that. He's saying they're part of our land, our soil now.
Exactly. So it's not like the status of the eastern areas before, where they felt that they were de facto independent but reliant on Russia. They're essentially kind of client states. These are part of the Russian Federation in the eyes of Russian law, but not recognized by anybody, or unlikely to be recognized any, but a few countries who also have difficult relations with the rest of the world. The United States has been very clear. President Biden yesterday was also very clear that this is illegal, that it won't be recognized by anyone.
The United States will never recognize Russia's claims on Ukraine's sovereign territory. This so-called referenda was a sham, an absolute sham. The results were manufactured in Moscow.
But it definitely raises the stakes. It's a point, I think, of no return for Vladimir Putin. It certainly seems to be a point of no return for the idea of any kind of peace process. Once you've basically gone into a country, you've occupied part of territory, and you go, hey, you know what? Actually, it's no longer your territory. This is part of my country. Well, then there's nothing to really negotiate. And for the Ukrainians, President Zelensky's been very clear. He will not recognize this. But not just that, they are determined that they can win, and they plan to regain 100% of their territory. So it's not just the land that Russia has taken since February the 24th of this year, but it's all land that Russia has taken since 2014.
And just so I'm clear, Ian, if you're Vladimir Putin, now you're saying these are part of Russia. You can't lose these back, artfully or otherwise, and still expect to remain in charge of Russia, I imagine, right? Like losing these now becomes a fundamental issue for his power.
Exactly. This is kind of an existential moment in some senses, and that's why I think it's a point of no return for Vladimir Putin. Once you've said that, there's no going back. You can't then sit down at the negotiating table and say, okay, well, I'll give away part of Russia. I mean, that certainly isn't the way that Putin has set about this. I mean, President Biden talks about Putin's imperial ambitions. This is exactly what we're seeing. I mean, the mask is well and truly off. You know, there's no longer a pretense of what Russia really is under Vladimir Putin. It is an authoritarian state with imperial ambitions that feels that it can just take the land from other nations. We all expected this. It was predicted, but nonetheless shocking.
All right, Ian Panel there in Kiev. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Sometimes I randomly remember that when we look back on 2022 years from now, it won't just be remembered for hurricanes and midterm elections and wars. For millions of Americans, this will forever be known as the year where people had $10,000 or $20,000 of student loans knocked off their balance sheets forever.
Such a weight lifted.
I'm gonna raise a glass and toast with my friends.
I'll certainly take what I can get.
Finally, some unfair happens that helps out black and brown folks.
I mean, think of how truly life-changing that amount of money can be. For many families, that is the thing they will remember, if it happens. And I say if, because when President Biden announced he was taking the step unilaterally to forgive these debts on people making under $125,000 a year, some folks wondered, wait, can the president do that himself?
95% of the borrowers can benefit from these actions. That's 43 million people.
Well, yesterday, several states filed lawsuits saying, no, he can't. And on that same day, the Biden administration actually tweaked its rules for which debts are about to get forgiven. ABC's Ann Flaherty covers federal agencies. And is it possible that the government pulls like a take-back-see? What is going on here?
Well, it's a lot all at once. I mean, you were asking, can the president do this? And the answer is he can, up until the point that a judge tells him that he can't. So this is pretty much the story of every presidency, right? Two things that we need to know is that, one, what he did was absolutely unprecedented. So the student loan program has been ramping up since the Lyndon B. Johnson days. And basically no president ever has looked at students and said, wait, no, never mind. Let's just go ahead and not have you pay back this money. Right. So in a sense, a judge could look at this and say, wait, what are you doing? And the other thing is that he's relying on a law that was enacted after 9/11. And this was a law that said the president can reduce or erase student loan debt during a national emergency.
Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it the most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic, making under $125,000 a year.
But, he's also the same president that went on national television recently and said the pandemic is over. So that's the Republican argument on this.
His comments he made with 60 Minutes on CBS that is getting attention.
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
I don't think it's a coincidence that on the same day that the Republicans filed this lawsuit, we also have, the Education Department pulling back on aspects of this plan. I think that's a little bit of, legal maneuvering to try to make this stick, to try to make this work because, we've got an election coming up. He wants to keep this.
Yeah, so let's talk about these lawsuits first, because again, I was asking everyone, can Biden do this? And everyone was like, yeah, Education Department has broad authority. So who is filing these lawsuits and what exactly are they challenging?
So we've got 6 states that have filed their case in a federal court in St. Louis, all red states, all conservatives. And they say, look, the president is saying that the pandemic is over. So what's the emergency here? You can't erase these loans. At the same time, when you read this complaint in court, it reads like a political statement. It's talking about the economy, how miserable it is. Why is the president giving out a giant stimulus check to only people who went to college? They say it's just patently unfair. So the White House is pushing back. They say, we're going to fight this. They gave me a statement that said Republicans are working against the interests of middle class and working class families. So, the next move is by the court.
But we're going to fight this, except we're also going to change who gets loans forgiven, perhaps? At this moment, Anne, who is about to get their loans forgiven and who might not?
So everybody was supposed to get loan forgiveness up to a certain point. What's changed here is that we're talking about these federally backed loans that were guaranteed by the federal government but handled by private banks. So Republicans were saying people can be hurt by this move. It's the student loan servicers that are going to be put at a disadvantage. The Education Department,
private businesses, essentially.
Right. And so the Education Department quietly changes their language on their website. And, before they had said, well, if you can consolidate all these loans that are handled by private banks into these federal direct loans is what they call them, that will qualify for relief. So then they changed the website to say, if you have consolidated these loans by September 29th into federal direct loans, then they will qualify.
Wait, that was yesterday. They said, if you've done it by yesterday?
Yes, exactly. So it's a little bit of a, wait, what? People are going to be waking up to that and saying, if you have those type of loans. So, overall, the loan relief program is still there. A judge has not blocked it. People should keep moving forward with, asking the government for relief on this. They should not stop. We don't know where this is going next. So TBD.
Yeah, and most of this forgiveness plan remains intact. Remember, if you were paying money towards paying down those debts during the pandemic, you get that money refunded. That's staying around. But for hundreds of thousands of people who had these privately held loans, a lot could be changing. Anna Flaherty, thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
And one last thing. If you grew up in an area with strip malls all around like I did, or maybe you lived by the mega mall, chances are there are now at least a few abandoned storefronts in town. Well, in California this week, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a new law that could turn that old Blockbuster Video into a house.
the original sin in the state of California, and that's the issue of housing and affordability. It touches more things in more ways on more days than any other issue.
This is a proposal that's been floated by housing advocates for a while. In the country's most populous state experiencing a housing crisis, isn't it clear that we need less commercial spaces and more apartment complexes? This law instantly opens up commercially zoned properties to be built on by real estate developers. And here's the kicker, regardless of local laws, meaning as long as you build a certain number of affordable units, local zoning ordinances can't touch you.
Just build housing. It's not even that complicated. It's, Econ 101. Build more housing.
This has infuriated some city governments who have carefully plotted out for decades which neighborhoods should be residential, which should be for shopping. Plus, these local leaders say all the shopping is what brings in all the property tax and sales tax dollars, way more than a 1 or 2 family unit. They say, how are we supposed to provide new city services for all these new residents if we don't have that money? The problem with that thinking, though, is new businesses are not springing up left and right, or if they are, they're not looking to use that building formerly occupied by the Photomat.
Why do so many people come to Photomat? Because they just wouldn't trust their pictures to anyone else.
Online shopping has rendered a lot of these properties obsolete. This all leaves 2 more questions. 1, what will all these cities look like with improvised housing schemes? And 2, which old store would you want to be your new home? Clearly, the answer's got to be Toys R Us, right? There have to still be a few old bouncy castles sitting around inside. Start Here is produced by Kelly Therese, Jen Newman, Brenda Salinas Baker, Madeline Wood, Vika Aronson, Iru Ekpanobi, Cameron Chertavian, and Tara Gimbel. Ariel Chester is our social media producer. Josh Cohan is director of podcast programming. I'm our managing editor. Liz Alessi is the head of ABC Audio. Thanks to Lakia Brown, John Newman, and our intern, Ania McLean. Special thanks this week to the entire ABC News team in Florida reporting back these sights and sounds. Also, the team facilitating all these interviews you've heard. Justin Weaver, Kat McCullough, Josh Hoyos, Rachel DeLima, Aaron Zimmerman, Chris Berry, and Stephanie Pawlowski. I'm Brad Milkey. I'll see you next week.
ABC News, America's #1 news source.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom! Now that's how you start your day, people.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Ready for election night. I'm ready for debate night. I'm ready for it all.
This midterms is really important.
Hi, everyone.
We're going to run you ragged.
What would George do? We're working on it, George. We're going to make you proud.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis. Streaming weeknights.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.